So hello and welcome, and with me is Ankush Jain, who is a 3 Principles coach, and we're going to spend the next 10 minutes just looking at 3 Principles coaching and what it is and how it's different from other coaching. And if you are a Principles based coach, how do you actually get your message out there? Well, Ankush is very successful as a coach in what he does, so hopefully he can give us some tips. So first of all, hello Ankush, it's great that you can see us, speak to us today. Tell me a little bit, how do you describe a 3 Principles coach? What would you say to people when they say, well, what is that?
You know, every time I get asked the question, I answer it differently. So it just depends, what makes sense to me at the time. And also, not just as a humorous comment, but it really depends on where the person's coming from. So if I was being asked that by a friend, it would be a different answer to maybe if I was talking to a CEO of a large company. So I'll do my best to explain it here. 3 Principles is basically a new niche part of psychology. It's really come about from a few well-known psychologists such as Dr. George Pransky, Dr. Keith Blevins, and Dr. Roger Mills, who's passed away, about how the mind works. And in psychology today, there's no agreed upon way that the mind works. We have lots of theories. And these psychologists believe that they can explain how the mind works in a way that is universal principles to every single person. Now, coaching, and this is something that I've been saying for the past year, is a profession in its own right, as you know, as I'm sure people listening to this know. And so the 3 Principles isn't necessarily a way of coaching per se. The 3 Principles is an understanding of how the mind works. Now, you may or may not agree with that approach, but it's what I believe is the way the mind works. And having an understanding of how the mind works, which is universal to every single person, if you're a coach, makes your coaching far, far, far more impactful. Number one, because for me, I've been around the self-development world for 11 years. I'd changed incredibly as a human being in those 11 years for the better. And yet I came to coaching not wanting any more self-development per se. I was like, I'm pretty good. I'm sure there's more stuff to learn, but I'm good. And I got introduced to these principles through my coach training, and I was amazed at just how impactful they were in my own life. Especially considering I was in a place where I was really happy with my life. I wasn't depressed or upset. I was like, wow, I finally feel like I'm enough right now. Like I've done all this training and development for so long. So me being impacted by that, of course, makes me a more impactful coach. That's the biggest thing. And it helps me deal with the challenges and stresses of life or anything that I have to come across, confidence or worthiness issues that we face as coaches. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it makes me appear like a genius when I'm coaching someone, just because I know how the mind works. So I had someone, I was doing some live coaching the other day on a webinar, and I had someone approached me about how they were feeling jealous of a colleague and they wanted more self-love. Now, before I understood a little bit about the 3 Principles, I would have talked about strategies to develop self-love or feeling better about yourself or something else. But instead, in about 15 or 20 minutes, I was able to point this chap completely in a different direction simply because of what I knew was happening. He had a misunderstanding. And not only am I just doing that, it was actually really helpful to him. And I've seen that time and time again for numerous clients. And in fact, Steve Chandler, who's a very well-known coach in the US, says when he has clients who basically are beyond his help, kind of, I can't help this person anymore. He goes, I send them to a 3 Principles coach, because he goes, that seems to really have more impact than anything else he's ever come across.
So, excuse me. So I'm absolutely certain that for people that are watching this, who are new to the 3 Principles or have heard about the 3 Principles, they're probably saying, tell me, what is this, these magic principles? How do I share this with my clients. So how do you describe what they actually are?
I really don't, or I try not to. And again, I'm not trying to be evasive, but we've got a relatively short time today. You've got numerous different people listening to this. And what I find is the most effective way to help people have an understanding of this is to make it very relevant to them. So if I'm describing this to someone, I might say, tell me an area of your life where maybe you'd like some coaching. And it doesn't need to be serious. And they might say, well, you know what, my kids give me hell, right? Like, if there's one thing I could change my life, my kids, they just late every morning and they just really stress me out. If I could just sort them out, that seems to be an area I can't handle. Well, that would just be a great starting point for me. And I would talk about that feeling of stress. I would talk about how that's being created. And three principles approach, or three principles understanding, is pointing people to the fact that 100% of their experience of life, their felt experience, comes from basically what we call thought. And by thought, we don't mean a thought, we mean all mental activity. And it's called the principle of thought. And some people listen to this and either typically have two reactions. One is, yeah, that's really obvious, I know that already. Or two, that doesn't make sense, there's exceptions. And so I normally take one of those starting points and go a little bit deeper. So if people go, yeah, I know that already, and I had someone on the phone going, yeah, I know this, I understand, I get it, so what? This is not really having an impact on me. And while we were talking, his phone kept ringing. And as his phone kept ringing, he cancelled it again. And the third time he picked it up and he said, I'm busy, call me later, put it down. They rang a fourth time and he was fuming, right? He's like, I'm on a Skype call, And I said to him, how do you feel? And he said, I'm really upset. And I said, well, where do you think that upset feeling's coming from? And he goes, well, of course it's coming from the person on the phone. They're so inconsiderate. It's they're this, they're this, they're this, they're this. And I said, well, we've just been pointing to the fact that 100% of your felt experience is coming from thought. And you said you got that, but here you're saying your felt experience is coming from this person calling you. And all of a sudden they were like, oh wow, I hadn't really thought that. And for me, what's happened in my own life is I had exceptions where I thought my experience was coming from something other than my own thinking. And then over time, it's been revealed to me, and I don't mean woo-woo revealed, I mean, it's just become obvious to me that, I'm creating this, I'm involved in the equation of me getting upset or me being happy. It's coming from thought. So I'm giving a very brief answer because we've got a very short amount of time, but this has been really impactful, and this has been taken into businesses, it's been taken into the military, it's been taken into education in small ways all around the world, and it's starting to really gain a foothold for one reason and one reason only. It's very, very, very impactful beyond any other approach I've seen.
So when you actually talk to people then about your approach, because the three principles is quite a niche approach, if I'm right, what you're saying is you don't really emphasize that you're a three principles coach. You're much more interested in finding out what the person might want coaching on. Am I hearing that right, Ankush?
Yeah, and it does depend on who I coach. So, I coach, I've done coaching in schools, I've coached people who've got full-time jobs, business owners, I've coached coaches. It really depends. So some people now have approached me because they're coaches and they would like to build into their practice three principles understanding. So obviously when I'm working with those kind of people, then I will very specifically talk about the three principles. Sometimes with my other clients, I will also talk about the three principles, but I don't start there because that's not what they want. And for me, part of being an impactful coach is forgetting about what I know or what I want or what I think the client needs, but it's about really starting from a place of what the client wants. So a couple of weeks ago, I was delivering with a colleague some training in a school, and they had a well-being day, and they wanted to help their teachers and ancillary staff get over their stress. So they don't care about the three principles. They don't care about a new paradigm in psychology. And we had, an hour and a half to deliver four workshops of an hour and a half. So in an hour and a half, we could get in a real muddle trying to talk about the background and the history and all the rest of it. It's not needed. But what I can point people to is where their feeling of stress is coming from. And if they realize it's coming from their own thinking, that gives them more psychological freedom, which is really helpful compared to other approaches. And people found it very helpful. So that's kind of my starting point, is what do people want? Now, sometimes I had a client last year, two young guys, ran a very, very profitable business from scratch. And they were saying they were having trouble with a colleague. So in my head, I thought, well, I'll probably talk to them about relationships. And I run a relationship podcast. So I thought, yeah, I know all about relationships. But I'm a coach. As a coach, I'm listening. I'm asking questions. And so as I listened and asked questions, I didn't talk about the three principles at all. I didn't even need to touch on them. There was none of that activity going on. There was none of that kind of coaching. I was just asking questions. And what became really, really obvious is the person they were having problems with was because there were another partner in the business and they weren't putting as much effort into business they felt to justify it. But after I asked a load of questions and we worked out what other things that person was doing, how they were being recompensed, it became really obvious to me and to my clients why this person was showing up in the way they did. And it had nothing to do with the mind. It was just very, very basic common sense. So I don't start from a particular approach. I'm a coach. I listen. I ask questions. I'm coaching. But most of the time, me having an understanding of how the mind works, i.e. the three principles, really helps me be more impactful.
Yes, and I think that's what I'm hearing there, is that there are two things really. One is having an understanding of the three principles informs you and is your foundation as a coach, so that there's an understanding that you understand what's going on for you. And if you understand what's going on for you, you understand what's going on for your client. And then the second thing is that when it's applicable and relevant, then this might be about sharing with the client more about how these principles actually operate and show up in their life. However, sometimes it's just about being a coach, listening, asking good questions, and that's all that's actually required in that particular situation. Is that what we're saying here?
Pretty much, yes. And I think a lot of people get confused. A lot of people who are trained in the three principles approach, they get kind of confused with that. And as you know, I run a group for coaches because I want to make it really clear that coaching is a profession. And the three principles is an understanding of how the mind works. Now, you can have a deeper understanding of how the mind works, and it can make you a more effective doctor. As I spoke about my sister, that's really helped her. It can make you a more effective lawyer. And there was a lawyer in Canada who's passed away now who had an understanding of the three principles and was very, very successful. It can make you a more successful leader and manager. It can do all sorts of things for you because you have a deeper, there is no area of your life that cannot be improved by having a deeper understanding of how the mind works. It's so impactful for every single person. Now, so that's great because as coaches, we know that we've got that in our back pocket, if you like, that can help any client that we work with. On the other hand, as a coach, you've still got to coach. It's still useful to understand what it means to be a professional, where you go and get clients, how you show up, the approach you take. And that's very much a profession. And they're two different things. And people, I find, tend to get confused between the two. They kind of merge it all into one. Well, if I get a deeper understanding of the three principles, that means automatically I'm a three principles coach or a practitioner or something. It doesn't. It just means you have a deeper understanding of how the mind works.
Great. And it's very useful as a coach, but actually if you want to build a practice, then there's an additional element that is worth spending time on understanding and developing for yourself. Ankush, this has been really fantastic. If people are curious about you and want to learn a bit more about you, what's the best place to find you online? How can they find out more about you or connect with you if they want to?
Yeah, so I've got loads of stuff online, but my kind of main portal, if you like, is my website. So if you go to www.ankushjain, which is ANKUSHJAIN.co.uk, you can contact me through that. I've got links to Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. But I mean, if you Google me, loads of stuff comes out. I've got 3 different YouTube channels. One of them is for coaches. I've got a Facebook group for coaches. I've got loads of stuff. But yeah, if you go to my website, you'll be able to connect with me, and I can point you in the right direction.